This Day in Sports History. This episode is brought to you by the Sterling Soap Company. Sterling Soap is 100% natural and with a variety of bath soaps, shave soaps, beard balm, lotions, cologne, and many more personal care products in a large variety of scents, you're sure to find something that's perfect for you or that special someone in your life. Check them out at sterlingsoap.com. And welcome back to This Day in Sports History, a member of the Sports History Network. You can find more info and more podcasts at sportshistorynetwork.com. It's August 30th, and on this day in 1904, it was the wildest Olympic marathon ever. So, a couple of things to know first. The 1904 Olympics were held in St. Louis. Pierre de Coubertin wanted New York to host the games, but they refused. Chicago was next in line to be asked and would have hosted, but President Theodore Roosevelt said it should be St. Louis, right in the middle of the country. Not an easy place to get to for a lot of European countries, and so they didn't even bother sending athletes. Second, the games were kind of secondary to what else was going on in St. Louis at this point, the World's Fair. St. Louis made zero preparations for the Olympic Games. They didn't build any stadiums, they didn't build any pools, and so on this day, it was the marathon with a distance of 24.85 miles. The weather was downright hot and it was humid. 31 runners started the race, and one of those 31 was a Cuban mail carrier named Felix Carvajal that had raised money to travel to the games from fellow Cubans. When he got to New Orleans, though, he lost most of his money gambling, and he had to walk and hitch an occasional ride from New Orleans to St. Louis, relying on the kindness of strangers to feed him along the way. He had not trained for distance at all. He didn't know anything about running or pacing. And when he lined up at the start line, he was wearing a long-sleeve shirt, long woolen pants, and heavy boots. A few of the American runners helped him out a little bit by suggesting that he cut off the sleeves just above the elbow, and maybe he should cut those woolen pants just above the knee, and then they loaned him a pair of flat running shoes. When the race got going at 3:03 in the afternoon, and the temperature soaring well into the 90s. It was mostly chaos. The footing was tough, with lots of cracked stones along the way, and there were men on bikes who were shouting at their runners, cars out front kicking up dust and making it difficult to see the way and breathe. There were delivery wagons, trolleys, even people out walking their dogs on the course. Now, the course had 7 hills, some with brutally long ascents. In many places, the cracked stone was strewn across the roadway, creating perilous footing. American Fred Lors was among the leaders for the early part of the race and even got out ahead of the cars, kicking up the dust and the dirt. Around mile 9, though, he began to tire and cramp. He was still about 3 miles from the only water stop that was allowed along the race course. Lors decided to quit the race instead, and he moved to the side, waving at the other runners as they passed by. Lors wandered for a little bit. He hitched a ride and was let off about 4 miles from the finish line. He thought. Well, he started running again, and he crossed the finish line, and he was hailed as the winner, even though, just by the looks of him, it did not look as if he had been affected by the heat or the dust along the way throughout the course of the race. And if they didn't know, well, he wasn't telling. He was close to accepting the gold medal from Roosevelt's daughter when the second-place finisher crossed the line. Thomas Hicks had at least run a marathon before and had been one of the pre-race favorites, and when he finished, he looked a lot different than what Lors looked like. Hicks was covered in dust and grime, and he was visibly tired. When race officials saw that, they started asking some questions, and finally, Lors confessed that he'd taken a car ride for 13 miles of the race. Lors would eventually be banned for life for his stunt. That ban was later rescinded. So Hicks was declared the new winner, but it soon came to light that he had been given strychnine with about 7 miles to go. He was tiring and he wanted to quit at that point. Well, his coach would not let him and gave him strychnine-laced egg whites, not once, but twice. Now, that's not illegal, really, but strychnine has been known to kill people. But at this point in history, it was used as a stimulant. Its use in rat poison and Agatha Christie mysteries would come later. Speaking of dying, another runner nearly did. William Garcia collapsed on the side of the road about 8 miles from the finish. Dust had coated his throat, which led to a rip in his stomach lining, causing him to hemorrhage. Had he gone another hour without any help, he would have probably bled to death. But he didn't, so that's good. And there was another runner that got chased off the course by a dog. And what about that Cuban runner, Carvajal? Well, he was having a grand time. Again, he knew nothing of pacing, and he was not trained. He stopped and talked to the bystanders along the way. He ran in bursts, and then he'd walk. And he got hungry a few miles from the finish. He found some apple trees, had a few, got a bellyache, took a nap, got up, and he ran to the finish. And he still managed to finish in 4th place. With all the chaos, the cheating, and near-death experiences, it is a wonder that the marathon continued on as an Olympic sport. On this day in 1991, Mike Powell finally broke a record that many had been reaching for nearly a quarter century. Well, really, Mike Powell had just been chasing Carl Lewis for almost a decade. Those two had battled it out in long jump competitions from the Olympics to the World Championships and other meets all around the globe. But both men wondered if anyone could reach the rarefied distance of 29 feet, 2.5 inches. That was the length of Bob Beamon's gold medal-winning long jump at the 1968 Mexico City Olympics. For 23 years, it stood as the Mount Everest of records until Powell bested not only Carl Lewis, but also topped Beamon's mark with a leap of 29 feet, 4.5 inches in Tokyo at the World Track and Field Championships. Interestingly, 15 minutes before Powell's jump, Lewis had jumped 29 feet, 2.75 inches, also beating Beamon's mark. But it was disallowed because of an excessive tailwind. Powell's jump was within the accepted limit. Powell's new world record and win on this day also snapped Lewis's 65 consecutive long jump wins over the previous decade. And Powell's mark he set on this day is still the world record, 33 years later. On this day in 2003, Katie Knida became the first female to play in a Division I football game. Knida suited up for the New Mexico Lobos against the Texas State Bobcats. To say this was a blowout would be a bit of an understatement. The Lobos won the game 72-8. After Hank Baskett scored on a 20-yard touchdown pass to give New Mexico a 56-point lead in the 4th quarter, Lobos coach Rocky Long sent Knida out to make history. She knocked the point after through the uprights to score her first collegiate point. She came back a few minutes later and kicked another one to provide the final margin of victory. Knida had been on the roster at the University of Colorado in 1999 and 2000, but never saw the field and suffered harassment from her teammates and a sexual assault that she detailed in her 2005 book, Still Kicking: My Journey as the First Woman to Play Division I College Football. And before there was LeBron James or Michael Jordan, before even Moses Malone, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, or Bill Russell, there was William "Pop" Gates. On this day in 1917, Gates was born in Decatur, Alabama. He grew up in New York City, and he went on to become one of the greatest basketball players you probably never heard of. Before Moses Malone became the first player to make the jump from high school to the NBA in 1974, Gates did something similar in 1939, going from Benjamin Franklin High in New York to play for the New York Renaissance. Now, the Wrens were a professional barnstorming basketball team in the vein of the Harlem Globetrotters, traveling all over the country to play. Gates remembered playing every day of the week, hopping on a bus and traveling up to 300 miles to play a game, and then load the bus up again for another long journey to a metro or small town. Gates would also become the only player to play for both the Wrens and the Globetrotters. And in 1946, about 6 months before Jackie Robinson would break the color barrier in the major leagues, Gates, along with William Dolly King, were signed to play in the National Basketball League, the precursor to the NBA. And time now for today's That's Got Nothing to Do with Sports fun fact. On August 16, 1942, a military blimp with a crew of 2 men launched in San Francisco for a routine patrol over the Pacific Ocean. Several hours later, it crash-landed in Daly City with the flight crew missing. Speculation as to what happened to the men included UFO abduction to being kidnapped by a Japanese submarine after flying low over the water. While the men's bodies were never found and there is no evidence to support it, the most credible idea of what happened was that one of the men attempted to drop a signaling buoy near an oil spill, but lost his footing and, while hanging onto the side of the ship, hollered for help. When the other man came to offer assistance, both men fell in the sea and drowned. The Ghost Blimp's gondola was not too badly damaged when it crashed, and after being repaired, was used as part of the Goodyear blimp fleet that hovered over football stadiums in the 70s. This has been an original Thrive Suite production.